legislators to be released on bail, and together with me here I have counsel representing Moses Kuria, who has filed an application seeking to have Kuria be released on bail pending investigations so that he may attend the 2 p.m. Parliament session. Now, this is Cliff Ombeta. Maybe you tell us more about your application that you filed this morning.
The application that has been filed actually was for the purpose of ensuring that the accused are brought to court in time and maybe released also on bond. The reasons being that today the Parliament session is starting, and the President is going to start the session today, and Moses Kuria is a member of Parliament. For him then to miss this session seemed to be very well calculated by the police so that to ensure that he does not attend the session. The argument is that they're still holding him, and that by the time they arrested him yesterday it was and booked him in the session is 24 hours are not yet over. But our argument is very simple. The moment they called him in the morning and had him in their offices by afternoon, the time starts running, and by now they have not yet brought them to court. We hear that after they heard that the application has now been filed, they are now making desperate moves to be able to rush to court and bring them so that they can be able then to charge them officially. And then another application they intend to do is that they should not be released on bond. But our argument is that that should not be the case. Our argument is that once a person has been arrested and you are brought in before court, which they have not done at this particular moment, he will be released on bond. But also, an officer who is in charge of a station, once a person has been brought to court and the offense is not of the magnitude that can be like murder or treason, then the OCS has got a right to release the accused person on bond because the person is entitled to. But when the OCS of Mozaiga and Pangani start telling us that the accused person cannot be released on bond because of orders from above, then we start questioning that, is this really the kind of rule of law that we are looking for? There is a problem. Have you seen the charge sheet? No, we have not seen the charge sheet yet. And though we are hearing its issues to do with the hate speech, until we see the charge sheet, then we are able to see that the charge is actually there. Then we can see whether it is a proper charge, whether it is defective, whether it's one that we can actually accept. So until we see it, then we can be able to comment. But we have not been allowed to see any charge. It had not been drafted by yesterday evening. It had not been drafted by this early morning. One of the lawyers, Mr. Francis Munyororo, is hanging around Pangani police station to see what the position is at the moment. It is now that the officers from CID headquarters have gone to Pangani police station. So you can see that the delay is actually tactical and intentional. Well, that is Cliff Ombeta. As a speaking, lawyers representing Mudama are in court before Luka Kimaru arguing their application. We will keep you updated. My name is Zuya Walter.
Thanks for that, Zuya. And IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba was last evening thrust back into the Electoral Commission team that will manage the fresh presidential election after a church-mediated retreat in Naivasha. Let's cross over to the Anniversary Towers, where Sam Gitoko is on standby. We understand that the IEBC is expected to meet presidential candidates or their agents ahead of this fresh presidential election. Sam Gitoko, what's happening there?
Well, good morning, Lillian. Yes, we're expecting the presidential candidates or their agents to appear before the IEBC. They were scheduled to be here at 11 o'clock, but it's already 11 minutes after the hour. So the expectation is that they're still on their way here. What we understand is that from the National Super Alliance, there will be 3 principals. You realize that there are 5 principals within the coalition, and we are told that 3 of them will be appearing before the IEBC commissioners. And then from the Jubilee side, we are told that one of the principals, or rather one of the party leaders, the deputy party leader in this sense, will be making his way here, but we're still waiting to confirm really his arrival and the delegation that are making their way here. But more importantly is the content that they are coming to focus on when they meet the commissioners or they meet with the commission team. And what we understand is that from the National Super Alliance, they're insisting. You said that Ezra Chiloba has been dropped back into the team that has been given the job to prepare for the fresh election for the schedule for the 17th of October. What we know is that the National Super Alliance is still insisting that Ezra Chiloba and 5 other officials, top officials who manage the August 8th election, they're insisting that they should not be part of the team that is preparing for that election. They are saying that having the same team oversee the election is doing the same thing the same way without and expecting different results. So they're insisting that they'll wait to hear from the commissioners when they appear before them on what preparations they are putting in place, but majorly their focus is on the officiating of that election, as I said, scheduled for the 17th of October. On the other hand, from the Jubilee side, what we know so far is that they're insisting on the independence of the commission. They are saying that they should leave the IEBC to make its decisions. If they feel that Ezra Chiloba and the other team of 5 should not be part of the team preparing for the election, that's according to them. But if they insist that they have to be in it, then they will have to respect that decision. They're insisting that as an independence commission, then they are at liberty to make their decisions on how to proceed on. But of course, we'll be expecting to hear how that meeting goes, bearing in mind that it will be a joint meeting between the IBC commissioners and the political parties, the representatives, as I said, from the Jubilee Party and the National Super Alliance, getting to discuss on the thorny issues that are coming out of this particular election. And you spoke about roping in of Ezra Chiloba. Yes, it was contained in that statement that was released yesterday by the IBC chair, Chebukati, alongside his other six colleague commissioners, indicating that Ezra Chiloba has been tasked to go to investigate what really went wrong on the during the 8th of August election. So he has been tasked to go ahead and find out what challenges there could have been and how they can be avoided. So in as far as his particular role in this election is still undefined, it's still not yet clear what he will be doing for the fresh election, bearing in mind that there is already a project team comprising of 6 persons led by Chiloba's deputy, that is Marjan Hussein Marjan, who are have already started their work as late as Friday last week. We had seen the terms of reference that had been issued to the 6 persons who are picked by Wafula Chebukati to oversee the preparation for the fresh election. So it's a matter of waiting to hear from the leaders as they appear here. As I said, from the Jubilee side, expecting Deputy President William Ruto to make his way here alongside other leaders from the party and the National Super Alliance. 3 principals from that coalition expected to make their way here to air their grievances or maybe make their presentations known on where they stand in as far as the preparation for the fresh poll is concerned. Lillian?
Thanks for that. That's Sam Gituku, who is at the Anniversary Towers, where the IEBC is expected to meet presidential candidates or their agents ahead of the fresh presidential election. And this is, of course, a development coming after IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba was last evening thrust back into the Electoral Commission team that will manage this fresh presidential election. We will be having that discussion very shortly in studio, but before that, we're also expecting the release of DNA results of the 8 girls who died in the Moi Girls High School Nairobi fire. That was a fortnight ago. We'll be getting those results very shortly from the Chiromo mortuary funeral parlor. From the Chiromo funeral parlor, we'll be getting those DNA results, and we'll be going live there probably in the next hour of Citizen Extra. Before that, with me in studio, once again joined this hour by Javas Bigambo, political analyst. We're also joined by Mary Mwangi, who's a political analyst, and also with us is David Osiang, who is a public policy expert. Thanks for being with us. Let me start with you, David, beginning with yesterday's development after the IEBC retreated to put their house in order. We know the concerns that have come from both sides of the political divide. Question is, can Kenya pull off a fresh presidential election within 33 days, bearing in mind the issues that have been raised surrounding the Secretariat, surrounding the Kim's kit, all the issues that have been raised previously surrounding this particular commission?
Thank you, Lillian, and I'm glad to be here. The question is half or slightly more than half of the country assured that the process will be open, fair, free, and just? It doesn't look like that to me. You have had the leader of one arm of the competition, that's the NASA, Raila Odinga, who had, clearly expressed that he would not want to have the election go on under the current order. Now, recently, Chebukati has written a very lengthy letter to Chiloba as the head of the Secretariat, demanding for answers to some of those things. Of course, which entrusts Ezra with the role, with the responsibility of getting down to the root of what really went wrong. Is it ICT? Who in the Secretariat? Not necessarily himself. In my opinion, once the court had annulled the presidential election, the right and fair thing, honestly, would have been for the commissioners and the Secretariat leader, Ezra, to quit. to resign and say, you know what, the ruling is an indictment on us and on our leadership. The Supreme Court has pointed to technical and operational problems within the commission. We were unable to stem that. We have lost the confidence even in the eyes of the Kenyans. As such, we would like to step back and let someone else come and try to run this and wish the people who would be appointed well.
So you're not confident that the outcome of these talks or this retreat will lead to a more flawless process?
Not at all. I don't think that you're going to have, for example, the NASA supporters suddenly clapping. As opposed to that, they will be looking at Chebukati and asking, also all this while this was a smokescreen, you lied to us that you were trying to be tough.
Although
and yet
contrary
you
to what you're saying, Jubilee on the other hand feels that this commission has actually played into the demands of NASA.
That is where the problem has always been. When Jubilee defends the commission, then the question is the commission independent or is it a lapdog of Jubilee?
And we'll be getting reactions from both sides of the not both sides of the political divide. Yeah. We'll be getting reactions from William Ruto surrounding the IEBC, as well as those of Chebukati, the chair of the IEBC. Do we have that bite? Okay, as we prepare to get that bite, to you, Mary, as the IEBC reviews mistakes made in the August 8th election, they're yet to get a detailed judgment from the Supreme Court on the anomalies or where issues were cited.
First and foremost, I'd like to carry on from what David said, in the fact that most people are not comfortable with the fact that the IEBC has openly admitted through that memo that there were anomalies, and these anomalies were presented by the NASA candidate to the Supreme Court. And yet we are waiting now for the ruling, which we are now waiting for 21 days from the ruling. Was now we're a couple of 10 days, I think. And we want to know whether there's a threshold in so far as transmission of the results and administrative structures. So we want to know if one of those forms, being without a watermark, without the serial number, will cause the election to be annulled again. So we're not very comfortable with this scenario, and I would like to ask, what can be done? That is the question.
Javas, to you, Ezra Chiloba now managing this process all over again, and of course the conflict between whether these were technical issues or administration issues.
First, we know that a house divided against itself barely stands. And after the Supreme Court pronouncement, we've seen evidently the house of IBC divided against itself and trying at best to sweep everything beneath the carpet, but the broom does not sweep clean. They took themselves to a retreat after all the wrangles and the memo that the chair wrote to the CEO, etc. Now, from yesterday's presser, it is clear that Elron Chiloba will still be the pilot or the captain of that whole team that will oversee this repeat election. It is true, beyond any form of negation, that the IEBC, as it is right now, is crippled. The authority that they have, I could say even the authenticity as they oversee this election, is merely borrowed and mounted upon the goodwill of Kenyans, simply because the luxury of time is not with us to try and make clean that institution that is supposed to be the custodian of the process of democracy conducted through elections. Now the IEBC has got a duty so important to prove itself and its worth to conduct yet again another election. But before we even move to that direction of giving them the benefit of yet again to birth that process, we heard and witnessed during the Supreme Court proceedings that there were, for example, foreign forms that were introduced or seemingly were introduced during the process. And one of the councils, actually the leading council for IEBC, said, and I quote, that out of abundance of caution, IEBC introduced the serialization and the barcodes. Out of abundance of caution. How unfortunate. The place of uniformity stands tall. it must be known then, as we move into this repeat election, that if at all a particular mechanism is introduced, uniformity, for example, of all forms, of all ballot papers, must be there.
Which is why I asked whether 33 days is sufficient to be able to pull this off.
Yes. Another question then, and of course every stakeholder asks themselves, that will they go through another process of picking, of procurement, procuring another company to print ballot papers? If at all it's not possible, and that still the Algoria company has got to print this, to what extent will there be satisfaction on the part of all stakeholders that there will be no mischief entertained on the part of any player, on the part of Algoria itself?
But even as we talk about mischief, Mary, looking at the fact that this is a presidential election, a fresh presidential election, the mamas from both sides of the political divide, where you hear NASA talking about executive interference, from Jubilee saying that essentially IBC is Jubilee and Jubilee is the IBC. NASA on the other hand, rather Jubilee on the other hand, now saying that the IBC chairman has been meeting NASA officials at night, and therefore, the tone from both sides of the political divide and how that might ultimately affect this process, flawless as it may be, what both sides of the political divide are actually doing in terms of messing this process up all over again, if at all it was messed up the first time round.
Well, in terms of the court of public opinion, nobody at this point is very comfortable with the IEBC as it stands. As my two panelists have pointed out, there were anomalies, and the anomalies are now being they're actually speaking about these anomalies in that memo. But I want to throw a spanner into the works. I believe that the Jubilee side should have asked for a recount of the presidential ballot, because we're looking at a very tight schedule here. And if we do not go to the voting process on the 17th of October, then what happens next? And this is where now we rise and ask a constitutional crisis. Are we going to have a caretaker government? Because at the end of the day, the voter is not comfortable with what's going on in the IEBC.
Good question. What happens next? Should this process actually not be carried out as accurately as the electorate would expect, and indeed as both competitors would expect?
This process will be carried out, I'm sure. I think that, and that's why I started by saying all these people should have resigned. You have Wafula Chebukati, the chair, writing down a memo pointing out very clearly before the ruling is out the anomalies that may have been there, the anomalies for which he paid his counsel PLO Lumumba to defend him in court for not doing the very things expressed in his letter as having been anomalies. Now, political processes are an issue of perception, Lillian. What is the perception out there? Do people perceive that the current leaders of the commission are able to deliver a just and fair process? It may not even be that they have errors, because politics is politics, and people, the truth, the lies travel half the world before the truth has even strapped its shoes. But if the perception is that you are complicit, the right and honorable thing to do would be to excuse yourself. Of course, we are beholden to the rule of law. We must stick by it. We must have an election in 33 days. If their reconstitution and mending fences is able to convince either parties, both NASA and CORD, that this is going to be for your good, that's well. We will say, that's fine, so long as the leaders on both sides say, you know what, we now trust that these people are going to deliver an election. If that's not the case, then something's got to be done. And the thing that's got to be done is that people will have to leave office. And you and I know very well that the likes of the NASA leader, Raila Odinga, starts today and declares that you're going out. You will go before the 33 days come. Now, it is better, therefore, for people to leave office on their own volition.
And that clearly has not happened, so I don't think it's going to happen.
No, don't rush and even declare it may not happen, because you and I will repeat know that if these people stuck to their guns and said, you're going home, or else there's no election, regardless of the assurance of the executive, that's the president and his deputy, you will go home. Now, they then need to ask themselves, is this what is right for the country? Is it about me? Because I understand them. It may be a chance for them to redeem themselves and prove that they were actually not accomplices in this act.
And as we continue with this conversation, we understand that NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga is currently at the anniversary towers, where he will be meeting the IEBC commissioners ahead of the fresh presidential election. Of course, we expect Deputy President William Ruto to be making his way there, because President Uhuru Kenyatta will be opening the 12th Parliament this afternoon, and therefore will not be at the anniversary towers. He will, however, be represented by the Deputy President. This is ahead of the fresh presidential election, which is 33 days away. Jarvis, we're looking at politics at a national level now. This is a presidential election. Before, we saw numbers perhaps motivated by the fact that this was politics at a local level with the other elective positions as well. Bearing in mind that we're now looking at a presidential election, the IEBC has been compromised in terms of how the electorate view it, how fair an institution it is, how objective it was in its August 8th electoral process. What do you see being the likely scenario come the 17th of October, now that we're looking at a presidential election and we don't have the other elective positions to consider?
You see, Lillian, the pillars of the temple of democracy are always fortified by the propagation of the rule of law. And it is clear to all of us and every observer that in the run-up to and up to the August 8th elections, the IEBC inveighed against that rule of law by way of its practice. And that is why they faced the indictment of the Supreme Court. What is proper then now is for IEBC, in its preparation and engagement, which of course actually right now they are behind schedule, they need to tie themselves to that provision of the law. It is also important for them to procure the goodwill of Kenyans by laying everything out openly and transparently, not just for the stakeholders in this political process, but for the satisfaction of every citizen. Now that they've got a team put together to oversee this, very many questions arise. Very many issues still hanging on to the mental skies of every citizen in this country as to whether IEBC has got the muscle, the power, the stamina, the confidence to bring or to oversee this election in a manner that will be, transparent and clear. Now the thing is this: before they even start the journey to repentance, starting by somebody like Chiloba, it is important for them to address, for example, picking every item by item in that chairman's memo. Before just even Chiloba responds to the issues, as it's been indicated in their presser last evening, that what is the preparedness of the commission to speak to each of those issues in terms of correcting, so that they don't get to have an occasion to be repeated by any officer, etc. We also had an issue where we had an allegation, which I think is proven, that various returning officers were playing various, improper roles. How are they going to rely still upon the very officers that oversaw the election? If at all they're going to have to replace some, have they set in motion that process? Those are things that they need to address right now. Because unless they address those issues, then that preparedness itself comes to question. And then now, even as they meet Honorable Raila Odinga and the leadership of NASA, Honorable William Ruto and the leadership of Jubilee, it must not be a question of these leaders just flexing their political muscle to show that they have no temerity to respect the independence and the mandate of the IEBC, but let them come together in that spirit of goodwill to make sure that the democracy of this country, as provided for in law, moves forward for the betterment of this nation.
The IEBC is an institution under siege, Mary. We see a lot of political interference. But having said that, looking at the dailies today, we see a full page of petitions. Martha Karua, for instance, saying that apart from nullifying the Kirinyaga gubernatorial election, she wants the entire election nullified. And, based on the number of petitions that we've seen, how then can the IEBC redeem itself, bearing in mind that indeed there is an element of political interference where we see utterances surrounding its credibility, in as much as they've been tasked with handling this process come the 17th of October. With this little time as we wind up, how can they redeem themselves?
The IBC is caught between a rock and a hard place. They want to redeem themselves, but the court of public opinion is based on the fact that they're hearing political rhetoric saying, if we don't win, then it's not a free and fair election. One side says that, the other side says the same thing. So now you have an electorate wondering who is going to win. How are we going to ensure that this will be free and fair? So I go back to my original point where I said I believe that the Jubilee lawyers should have asked for a recount of the presidential ballot. Yes, I feel there are people who will say that shouldn't be the case, but we actually went and lined up. If LASA feels that they did win in that occasion, then we would have the proof. If Uhuru feels that he won, we would have that proof. And be that as it may, IEBC right now will do everything possible to ensure that they will not make any mistake, and the electorate is watching.
But Mary needs to go through the report by the registrar. That was the investigative report by the registrar. What that was, the anomalies were so grave, Lillian. For example, you cannot recount ballot papers when the legitimacy of those ballot papers were even in question. Some of them were fake, let alone being cast. Some of them were fake. You have returning officers who played double roles. So one returning officer is a returning officer for 3 centers, and you wonder how the heaven did this happen. Now, this calls upon one of the things I've advocated for constantly, reworking our software. This country has Kenyans busy working on its hardware. We are building roads because they provide opportunity for corruption. We are working on all the hardware. So we have SGR, we have all that, but we negate working on the most important thing, our software, our moral values, because our returning officers are a representative of us, as are our leaders. Alright, so you have a returning officer who lives among you, who's corrupt to the core. He sees no problem. So you will kill Chiloba if you may, and I think he needs to resign, I still say, because he was the leader, even though he may not have interfaced at the local, at the grassroots level with some of these anomalies. You have a returning officer who goes and does what he knows is wrong, who is in the pocket of someone else, and just runs away from what is his duty. If it were in Japan, for example, anyone caught of corruption commits suicide. They commit suicide because it is so dishonorable to be corrupt that you can't live with it. Your children will not bear with it. Now you have returning officers. Will they be new? Will they be fired? Will they be charged? Will they be jailed? I hope they are, so that we are able to know. I wish it would happen before we even get to the 33 days. I'm not too sure that's going to happen. And so if that doesn't happen, I am not certain, because when you have hundreds of petitions, they're not only from one side of the stronghold or one party, they neither Jubilee nor us, everyone is crying. All of them are crying foul of the process. So we want to protect at the top the people who we deem work for or against us, you know. So NASA has identified that Chiloba has to go, Jubilee says Chebukati has to go, and then what?
And we're closing now, Javas. An election, a fresh presidential election must be held in 33 days. Let's get your closing remarks. There's a lot of timeline issues surrounding, of course, the process and the tendering of the relevant material that essentially will be used come this day. Your closing remarks.
You see, we await that Supreme Court judgment with the energy of a hunting lion. And I know very well that when that judgment is out, it will also bring out some fresh issues that politicians will want to harp on, that also will will necessitate that IBC reorganizes itself in such a manner that it avoids such kind of fault lines that were demonstrable during the August 8th elections. And so, even as we look at it, we know very well that IBC is skating on thin ice. Speed is of essence. But not just speed, the meticulous manner in which they try to correct the anomalies is that which they need to do with accuracy. Because it's not just a question of carrying out a fresh election. It's about carrying out a fresh election in a manner that is satisfying to the law, in a manner that is, correct, etc., verifiable, an election. And so looking at it that way, IBC anticipating some of all those issues that the judgment will bear, knowing some of the mistakes they made on their part, thanks to the memo by the chairman, IBC should work within these 33 days, actually only 30 days, to make sure that they correct some of these things. Because if they have to wait, on whom will they be waiting? The bell tolled upon that pronouncement by the Supreme Court. It is up to the IEBC to make sure that now they respect the law, they respect the integrity of franchise of every citizen who will cast their ballot on that day. It is not difficult. It is a mandate that is due to them, and they can discharge it if they choose to.
And Mary, you talked of a constitutional crisis. Should they not pull this process off come the 17th of October? For you, your closing remarks as we look at the issues surrounding the credibility of this institution.
What Kenya right now is facing is also a crisis of culture, this culture of impunity. As Moses pointed out, our software needs to be reworked on. We cannot have individuals who are running an institution allow for sloppiness to occur down to the institution, down to the polling station and constituency level. Why were there no people advising the agents or the returning officers that they needed the proper forms? Why was there no supervision going on? Why were these forms being brought in that manner to the tallying center, as Jarvis pointed out, not the right forms, without serial numbers, etc. We need to ensure that when we take on a certain job, and this job touches on the sovereignty of this nation, we do it well. And that those who do not do the right job get punished for it.
To you?
Well, I think IEBC and its leadership knew if they are to come in, or the same ones, if they are the ones to deliver to the next election, must understand that the role entrusted on them is so sacred, as sacred as that of the Supreme Court of this country. It is the lives of Kenyans literally rest upon. The political decisions about the future of every nation are such serious matters that they must handle it with the seriousness it deserves. We have a long way to go. We have a short time to get there. I hope that they're able to find some way of dealing with this and meeting this. And I am also appealing to the political class to be supportive of the agenda of trying to have an election, even though they have their demands. If they are addressed, let them support the process, both Jubilee and NASA, so that we are able to have an election. And I pray that IEBC leaders are able to do their jobs meticulously, because there is no room for error. The standards, the bar has been set so high, so much high, that they are demanded of absolute exactitude.
Very shortly we'll be crossing over to Anniversary Towers, where Sam Gituku will be giving us an update. But before that, as we close this conversation, let's move away from the IBC and talk about okay, before that, I'll be coming back to you very shortly. Let's cross over to Sam Gituku. He is at the Anniversary Towers, where the IEBC will be talking to presidential candidates or their agents very shortly. This ahead of the fresh presidential election, which has been slated for the 17th of October. We understand that NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga has made his way there. We are expecting Deputy President William Ruto to also be in attendance. Let's listen in.
Well, right, Lillian, yes, as you said, we have seen the delegation of the National Super Alliance, Raila Odinga, the candidate for NASA, alongside Moses Wetangula, the co-principal, and Musalia Mudavadi, who is also a co-principal. Of course, they are joined by several of their members of parliament, elected legislators, for instance, Senator for Siaya, James Orengo, and then we also seen Gladys Wanga, the county woman representative for Homa Bay County. So they are here alongside other supporters, several supporters and leaders, of course, as I said earlier, to make their word that of what they want to see with the preparations for the fresh election, which is scheduled for October 17. As I had said, is that their position has been, and this is what we have heard from people who have attended a briefing before they made their way here, that they are going to insist that the persons, the officials who have been touted or mentioned to have done some things the other way. So, for instance, the Chief Executive Officer, Ezra Chiloba, and 5 other top officials, they are saying that they're insisting that they should not be part of those who are managing the fresh election. They're insisting that should IEBC then say that the officials have to be there, then they'll have an alternative view which they're going to make public as soon as that meeting is over. But what we understand is that they're saying, even as they come with their position, they're also here to listen to the commission from what they have to say in as far as the preparations for this election is concerned. And the other thing is that we're still expecting the arrival of the Deputy President, as you said, William Ruto, alongside other leaders from the Jubilee Party to come and make their word in as far as the preparations for the fresh election is concerned. As we're still expecting them to be here. They were supposed to be here at about 11 o'clock. It's now 11:45. They have not made their way into the commission, so the commission building. So we're expecting to see them and also hear from them on what their expectations are. But ideally, this meeting has been called for IEBC to meet with the representatives of the two political parties or political formations, that is the National Super Alliance and the Jubilee Party, of course, who are fronting their candidates for the fresh presidential elections. We'll be expecting also to hear from the side of the commission on what their way forward is in as far as the matters that you are discussing to do with the officials to monitor, to manage the election, and also in as far as procurement of crucial items, the strategic materials that are required for the election, for instance, the ballot papers is concerned. So expecting to hear a word from them in as far as that is concerned as soon as that meeting is over. Lillian?
Thanks for that, Sam Gituko. Sam, before we let you go, who else is in attendance? You talked about Deputy President William Ruto making his way there, but you also spoke about some members of the political fraternity that have assembled there. Who can you tell us is currently there? Who can you confirm is in attendance?
Well, the leaders we've seen, because so far what we've seen is the delegation from the National Super Alliance. So we've seen Raila Odinga, the principal, and the presidential candidate from that formation. He is joined by his co-principals, as I had said, Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, and then the other leaders, the likes of Senator James Orengo, the woman representative Gladys Wanga, and several others, both elected and leaders who may have lost in the last election, have made their way here. But we've not seen the other principal, the running mate, Kalonzo Musyoka. We have not seen Peter Munya, the other principal within NASA. But of course, ideally, what we understand is that the commission will be meeting representatives from this team. So ideally, not all of them will have their way into the boardroom, bearing in mind that it is two teams that are involved here. But as far as the Jubilee Party is concerned, we have not seen the leaders to the rank of representatives of the presidential candidate or the running mate, Deputy President William Ruto. But the expectation is that that delegation will be led by the Deputy President. So we're still waiting to see as soon as they make their way into the anniversary towers, and then we can see the other members of the delegation as it will be. Lillian?
Thanks for that. Sam Gituko reporting to us from Anniversary Towers, where the IEBC commissioners will be meeting the presidential candidates or their agents as they prepare to go to the polls on the 17th of October. And even as that happens, let's talk about the hunt for votes. Jarvis, yesterday and today in the dailies, we see NASA accusing Jubilee of a mass sterilization plot. We saw the opposition chief Raila Odinga actually come out to reignite the tetanus vaccine debate. He claims it's a state-sponsored tool for mass sterilization, and if indeed this claim is authentic, is of course something that's subject to investigation. But as we look at the political rhetoric, as we look at some of the things that these candidates are saying, we hear President Uhuru Kenyatta on one end saying that he does not need NASA to attend the opening of the 12th Parliament. We see this claim here from NASA, and therefore just zeroing in on this particular topic, if indeed this is factual, if this is a political strategy, and why now?
A charge is now in circulation against government about this vaccination, which it is stated that has the effect of sterilizing all those women and children who received such vaccination. The Catholic Church in 2014 opined against this vaccination of course, it's government sponsored. We have also read from various world bodies, including the World Health Organization, the UNICEF. They have indicated that that vaccination that was administered is pure and that does not have such components that would sterilize women. All right? And looking at it that way then, it would be important for us to find a way of proving or disproving this charge. Also, the Ministry of Health needs to speak to this. It must not be taken as a campaign issue.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily a campaign issue. It is a matter of great national interest and even global
interest. If indeed it's not a campaign issue, then why now? The timing?
Well, of course, it has come out now. And we know very well that we are in the storm of campaigns. It will not be avoided. It is inescapable a fact that having come out at a time such as this, even if it was the Jubilee that was in the opposition, they would still grab it and run away with it. Now, why I'm saying that it must not necessarily be used as a campaign issue, because this actually is not a ball game matter. It is something that touches on the soul of this nation. Health, very necessary. And imagine, if at all it's proven that indeed that vaccine has got the effect of sterilizing all those to whom it was administered, how unfortunate would that be? And having condemned women who received such vaccination to childlessness as long as they walk upon this good earth. And that is why I would suggest that the opposition leader Raila Odinga, when he's speaking to this issue, he must not just speak to it as an indictment of Jubilee or government by pointing such finger, but also as a matter of great interest. He is a national leader, that this thing needs to be investigated or a serious inquiry, and a question of just sending a statement by the World Health Organization does not suffice. So it's important for the air to be cleared through a serious inquiry that is very objective, so that the truth can come to surface.
If indeed investigations are not complete, Mary, there are those that are interpreting this as a political jab. They are questioning the timing of the statement. There are those who feel that this is an extremely reckless statement.
The issue of vaccines are very emotive right now, both locally and internationally. As Jarvis has pointed out, the Catholic Church has been involved in this discussion prior to this announcement. However, like you pointed out, Raila's timing is very, very questionable. The issue of this hormone, I think it's called HCG, which makes people, well, women sterile or miscarry, is very, very serious in terms of the allegation and also the timing. So the question is, why now? Why now?
Whenever a country or a people have been in a point of confusion and they don't trust their structures like the Ministry of Health to be honest about things, they have run to the neutrality of the media to mediate. Now this leaves the media with a very huge task. Just as we hoped that, during the election, of course I understand they were gagged, that during the election they would give us their tally, because I knew different media houses that had various agents who accessed Form 34Bs and should have just given us what their results were. The media may be forced to spend a little more and find out who is the truth teller. Because you have the Catholic Church earlier, from 2014 into 2015 and a bit of last year, they were on it. They went and said, we have even tested this. We've taken it to the laboratories and proved that this is the case. Now, I don't know how it will play out when now Raila has raised it, because then you just say it's okay if the church does, but not very okay if the leader of opposition does it. When we're not certain, then it puts the media in a place. Will you help us with this? That's the way Kenyans look at it, and I hope we are able to get an address. And I bet it is too serious to be, simply put down or thrust on the floor as just another campaign gimmick. if it is true, regardless of where it has come, I bet it also gives the Raila Odinga political capital at this time, realizing that the leadership of the Catholic Church has not spoken for one of the leading religious groups in this country. Will they talk now? Won't they get up and join the fray? I really hope we are able to get that. That's too serious, Lillian. We are going to deal with the effects of Raila's statement. And that vaccine, its effects will be dealt with 10 years from now.
And later this afternoon, the NASA presidential candidate will be addressing a rally at Kamkunji grounds in Kibra. That's happening this afternoon. Also this afternoon, President Uhuru Kenyatta to open the 12th Parliament, even as NASA threatens to make good their threat to boycott the 12th Parliament, and that's coming up in the next hour. We'll be looking at those news later on in the day. That's happening, opening of Parliament happening at about 2:30 p.m. and indeed the NASA fraternity expected to be in Kibra this afternoon as well. That's all the time we had this hour. With me in studio was Javas Bigambo, political analyst, Mary Mwangi, political analyst, and David Osiang, public policy expert. We're back with more in the next hour of Citizen Extra. Stay tuned.